Okay, guys, so I'm sorry I had to cancel today's class, but I wanted to make sure I go over the presentation so we have it. It's an important topic. It's an important chapter on leadership. So we're going to dive into it. So this is a quick little 40-minute blurb. I probably won't take 40 minutes. It's designed to be interactive, so I probably won't be taking 40 minutes to go through it, but at least you all will have the PowerPoint so you can reference it. So as we dive into leadership, I'll be asking some questions for you all to reflect on and respond to. Those questions should be completed and uploaded into the assignment portal of Canvas. All right, let me know if you're having some glitches. Those of you who come in person know I frequently make mistakes. So let me know if there's any problems. All right, so guys, diving into leadership, it's really about leadership is not just about authority. It's really about influence. It's about direction. It's about being the vision manager. It's about being able to inspire and to encourage others to share their talents. So it's about creating that safe space where you use competition in a way in which it only fosters more team cohesion. All right, so it's about those collective goals and getting those deliverables completed. So one of the quotes that I found was leadership is about inspiring people to do things they never thought they could. Such a true statement. Right. So what's at the heart of leadership? So we're going to talk about defining leadership, leadership emergence, the theory framework, some of the theoretical frameworks, and effectiveness factors. All right. At the core, leadership is an influence process that empowers people to work collaboratively towards shared goals. It's not about command and control, but about inspiration, direction, and bringing out the best in others. So throughout the chapter, we're going to talk about that, how leaders emerge within groups. We'll go over the different types of leadership. Now, there's more that I'm not going to discuss in the PowerPoint, but traditional PowerPoint that came from Foresight, I did put that in, uploaded to the module, so you should be able to see that. All right, so the first question starting out the gate is, in your own words, how would you define leadership in a group setting? Give one example from a team, a club, or a class experience. How did leadership present itself in that space? Okay, so that's one thing that you guys are going to do is how do you define leadership in a group setting? Okay. So what is leadership? The two-factor model. Leadership involves guiding others, right? So it's task leadership and it's like the relationship leadership as well. All right. So the task leadership that focuses on the work itself, right? Making sure that you apply adequate amount of pressure, adequate amount of importance on the task to make sure that we're actually productive. Otherwise, you'll have a lot of people who have great relationships, but the productivity and the outcomes may not be able to reach the capacity required. All right. And at the end of the day, if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. You need to make sure revenue is up. You need to make sure that the process is moving. You need to make sure that the business is thriving. So while the relationships are good, that's not that balances out with the productivity. How are we actually utilizing our time effectively? All right, so task leaders excel at structure and accountability, right? It's sort of leadership would be like a project manager. If you are managing a project and all projects have an end date, and they have all of these key deliverables, and they have your workforce, your workload breakdown. So if that's your responsibility, you got to make sure that those deadlines are met. You got to make sure that everyone on your team is doing what they're supposed to be doing by the deadline. Otherwise, you can miss the overall deadline. If it's a grant that you're writing on, it's a product launch date that you're writing on, you have to make sure that all members of your team are actually making sure that they're meeting their deadline. Then there's the relationship leadership, right? That's about the human element. Make sure that you are supporting your team members. You have to be in a space and that type of leader where people can come in and let you know when they're having challenges with meeting a deadline. Listen, I'm not meeting my deadline. I'm not getting the information I need. I'm struggling with this, that, and the third. I can't seem to find. And if you don't have that sort of ability to foster relationships with your team, things will go and fall through the cracks. People will be scared and fearful of speaking up because of judgment and because of how that information can be received. Okay. So relationship leaders build trust and engagement, but really what we're looking for, you got to be able to balance both. So the leadership substitutes theory. Not every situation is going to demand strong, centralized leadership. There are times where that is necessary, absolutely. Some groups function effectively and with minimal formal leadership when members already possess clear roles and shared motivation, high competence, and well-established procedures to guide the work. So, for example, I support a private school. I'm there, but I am not really providing leadership while I am there. The only time that I provide leadership is when the principal is out. The principal pretty much already knows the expectation when it comes to managing and running a school. I don't have to give her any leadership guidance on that. I'm more of the visionary. I wonder if we try this, how would that work with our students? I wonder if this is a program that we would try. How would the parents perceive that? So I'm there as a think partner for her. That's my leadership role for in that case. So I have some style flexibility, right? And that's important. Leadership styles often overlap and intersect. The most effective leaders demonstrate adaptability, shifting between task-oriented and relationship-oriented approaches. So, as many of you know, I also oversee the operations of after-school programs. There's 4 different directors that have their own locations, and then up top is the executive director, and then over him is the director over our extended learning. So when it comes to that sort of approach, when I'm working with him, a lot of it has to do with deadlines, right? The audit is due here. How we backwards plan it to make sure that we are audit ready. Where are we missing? Not necessarily from the program. He's got the program under on lock. I have to focus on those other areas that we're not so tight on, right? Compliance. I want to make sure because it's about billing. I want to make sure that our compliance is tight. So there are times where I have to be very particular when it comes to deadlines, and I have to be rigid. But there are other times that I can be a little bit more lax. And so I look for those opportunities, but I also make sure that they see me in both lights. So I don't just go there to provide demands or go there to enforce policy. I'm also going to go there and walk the track with you. I'm also going to go there and play whatever sport you're doing in the after school program. So they get a chance to know me as Gina, the leader, but also as Gina, a colleague, right? Because at the end of the day, when you are in leadership, everyone under your leadership is still a colleague. Okay. And if you treat them in such a way that is respectful and of value, they will build confidence and they'll take more risk. And you want certain risk because that's how innovation is formed. All right. So the second application, so leadership styles often overlap and intersect. The most effective leaders demonstrate adaptability, shifting between task and relationship approaches based on the teams that need it at that moment, right? So think of a time when you worked in a group. Was the leader more task focused or relationship focused? How did that affect the group's success? All right, and respond to that in 2 to 3 sentences. Okay, and so now we're going to talk about leadership emergence. People used to say leaders are born. There's a born leader. Yes, possibly, and right. Yes, leaders are born, but they are also developed. They have to be developed. You can't just be born as a natural leader and not foster and not develop those skills. That would be irresponsible. There's actually a podcast that I listen to that say the leaders are not born, they're coached. So and that's a very true statement as well. As a leader who consistently tries to engage in self-reflections for self-improvement and for leadership improvement, I have to develop myself. That is part of the responsibility of the leader. It is the leader's responsibility to not only develop themselves, but they have to develop those under their reporting structure. Okay, that is part of leadership's responsibility, is allowing people to be transformative, allowing people to grow, and allowing people to feel edified at the end of their workday, right? So one of the most enduring questions in leadership studies asks whether leaders are born with these innate qualities or whether, again, they're just developed. And the answer is yes, right? They're all interactive. So the great person theory. Some individuals possess natural traits. They're naturally extrovert, confident, conscientious, and they're predisposed towards leadership roles, right? But not everybody's like that. Me, I'm an introvert, for real, for real. And then there's the zeitgeist theory. Zeitgeist theory says the situation and the historical moment has caused them to just emerge as a leader, right? So when the chips were down, there was one that rose above the rest. Right? And so that's the zeitgeist theory. That's what that is that through the core of the problem. I like to look at union leaders as an example. Union leaders normally come from working in those sort of blue collar industries, and were already working in the warehouse, working on the plant. And so from that group came a union leader. Similar to teachers, from the mass of the teachers, there's one that represents them all, the union teacher lead for the building. Okay, so that's that theory. And then, of course, there's the integrated view. Modern understanding recognizes leadership as a combination of personal qualities, learned behaviors, and environmental factors working together. I think nothing really showed this more for me and my generation than COVID. How we had to respond to a pandemic when we had no playbook for it, when we had no plan for it. There was nothing, and it was just like, oh, well. But all there was accountability, no structure, and even with the accountability, there were no expectation. We didn't know what the expectations were. They were fluid. The expectations changed from day to day. We was getting our ideas or getting our direction from the district, who was getting it from the state, who was getting it from the feds. It was such a trickle down effect. So by the time it came to us, if we didn't act proactively, we would have been too far behind the eight ball. But we were already a little bit ahead because you can see it happening. And if leaders have to be able to be predictors, you have to predict some of the trends, and you have to be able to guide your group in that direction. Okay. And I think that was actually COVID, like I said, really showcased that. And we had other people lend their talents too. Again, from our teachers, from their perspective, I had teachers that were emailing and had ideas and had recommendations of how we were going to turn our school into this virtual platform. And of course, they had the softwares out there, but we still didn't know all of the other nuances of it. So it was such a significant time. And it was a great illustration of how both the great person theory and the zeitgeist theory of how someone rises above the group and is able to be identified as a leader. So some of the personal qualities and behaviors, the Babel effect, right? Researchers demonstrate that group members who participate frequently and contribute quality ideas are perceived as more influential and leadership capable, regardless of formal titles and position. It's a lot of conversation, a lot of collaboration. That's why you can see how that, because you begin to like the person, the relationships are there, all of those other components, that whole social emotional component is being met. Then you look at the emotional intelligence, definitely a quality that's necessary. So you may be in the lab with the Babel effect, trying to work with your colleagues, trying to work with your directors, if you're in leadership, to try to find a resolution for a problem or try to determine what the next product you're going to launch. That's how that is. We're going to talk through that. You'll be able to experience them organically. With the emotional intelligence, that's another quality that's necessary so that you can actually be attuned, right? Recognize that they're not robots, recognize that people go through things, and you want to make sure that you're sentimental. One of the pieces that I do is I try to be intentional with recognizing people on their birthday. So for our school, we celebrate birthdays every month. We have birthday circles. We give them out. We express to them the gift that they give back to us, and we share out a verbal birthday wish, right? Which is a great way to build team, a great way to build camaraderie, and it makes people feel good on their birthday. So that came from the fact that there was a lot of disconnection on our team, and we was really trying to focus on regrounding us all in our shared goals. And also recognize that perception matters. There's days I want to go into work with straight scrubs, and I can't do it because if I come in there like I'm lax, like I'm exhausted, people will automatically begin to become lax and exhausted as well. You have to come in like you are the leader. You have to come in and it's unfortunate, but that's just the way our society is set up. We will evaluate someone how they look. If you come in disheveled, I'm gonna be like, oh my gosh, this person is unorganized. Now, whether I'm right or wrong, it doesn't matter. Whether I say it or believe it, doesn't matter. But that's my note. My first interaction is like, this person may look may look a little or unorganized. There's other pieces too when it comes to body language. So a person who slumps over, a person who's not giving eye contact could be perceived as being less confident. There's not too many people that want a leader with lack of confidence. You want someone with some rigor, some vigor. You want someone who can be confident. You want someone who's articulate. You want to have someone who can speak volumes. I had a boss a couple of years ago. I noticed that when it was hard conversations, he had a strategy. And it wasn't until later that I realized he had a stutter. So because he had a stutter, his strategy was he would start speaking softly, and then as he became confident, he would speak, louder. And once I realized that, I was like, oh, okay, this was at first I was like, I can't hear him. I'm thinking it's me. I'm thinking I'm bugging, but it wasn't. That was his strategy as a way to kind of build confidence for his audience. Right, wrong, and different. I'm just telling you what it was. Okay, so it's all about the perception. If people work out, you look like you take care of that. You look like I can trust you. You look like you're going to take care of us. Okay. It's all about the perception. It's all about that. So, next question. Not what personal qualities or behaviors do you think help someone emerge as a leader in a group? And explain briefly, 2 to 3 sentences. Guys, these are not going to be huge paragraphs. These are going to be small, bite-sized paragraphs, something similar to what you would be providing me if we was in class. Okay. Theories of leadership emergence. So multiple theoretical frameworks help us to understand why certain individuals emerge as leaders, why others don't. These theories examine everything from mental schemas to involuntary survival mechanisms. Okay, so I want to tell you this quick story too. So I was one of the younger leaders in my network at work. And a lot of times I was met with a little anger. People was a little hating on the low. I don't even know if it was on the low. They was just outright hating. And it was because they didn't feel as if I had been fully vetted for the role or for the job. However, and because I didn't meet that explicit model, it would be the first time that it was a female and not a male in this leadership role. So that was a change. I was younger and not as experienced, so that was a shift. And they didn't feel as if that I had the proper, I would just say even just the proper energy. I was a little aggressive, very, very passionate, very big on accountability, but also great with support, maybe less so on support. But because I was an introvert, a lot of people didn't know me. That was something I had to look within myself. I'm like, how do I show people who I am? How am I able to build those relationships so people can trust me a little bit more to follow my leadership and let them know that I don't have all the answers, but I'm constantly developing myself. And so they give me a minute. We're going to discover these responses together. We're going to discover these answers together. So, those who don't match what we think a leader should look like, that's based off of the implicit relationship theory, right? Social identity theory, leaders who embody the group's shared values, norms, and collective identity are more readily accepted and followed. They represent who we are as a group, right? So that means it's easier for them. They look exactly what we're looking for. If you are working in a former veterans group, right? Maybe it's a mental health group, but if the person who's leading the group to provide there, if he doesn't look like he's a former Marine, well, there's no former Marines. Anybody who was a former Marine, they're not really a Marine. They'll just say, I'm a Marine. There's soldiers and Marines. If anyone who is leading that sort of group don't look like they're part of that same sort of prototype, they're going to be a little resistant. They're like, oh, this person doesn't identify. They can't recognize. They don't relate. It's not relatable. It's not saying that that can't be something that can be overcome, but it is a challenge that has to be modified and regulated. Then there's a social role theory, the gender stereotypes and society role expectations creating barriers, making it systematically harder for women and minorities to be perceived leaders and even equally qualified. So there's a good book that I'm actually listening to on Audible called What Happened When Women Lead. And that's what the author explains, especially in certain industries, more techie industries, they're less likely to hire someone older. They're less likely to hire or have a female as a lead. And a lot of that had to come from the fact that, who's doing the funding? Well, once the guys are doing the funding, well, they're only looking for people like themselves. That's just the way human nature is designed. We normally sit with people who look like us. We look for people who look like us. So when you're thinking about that, except when it comes to leaders, we're open-ended to that. But there's a certain description that you may have in your mind. And when there's someone who presents themselves that doesn't meet that visual expectation that you have, it can cause some dissonance there as well. And yes, women and minorities have often been been on the receiving side of this. Also, I would say, some age inequality. If you have someone who's very young, this person is inexperienced, or this person doesn't know what they're doing. And then if you have someone who's a little older, a little more seasoned, this person has outdated. They're not going to try any new innovative ideas. Both of those are just assumptions, though. And then the terror management theory. During times of uncertainty, crisis, and threat, people instinctively seek strong, confident leaders who provide security and direction. Anxiety amplifies the desire for decisive leadership, right? Again, this was something that was huge during COVID. It's like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And I can't begin to tell you how many times I got a phone call about what are we going to do? What are we going to do? We're going to figure it out. That's what we're all going to do. We're all going to figure this out. And there was so many different lanes. And I said, well, let's just categorize our problems here. We have the kids, we have the staff, we have the process. So let's take one and we'll move it from there. Let's talk about what it is. And I always like to begin with the end in mind. That's from Covey. Always begin. That's one of those 7 habits. Begin with the end in mind. What is it that we need to achieve? And that's backwards plan. I use that same process when I'm trying to create a program. I use that same process when I'm writing for a grant. What is it that I want first? And then I'll backwards plan it out. It's an effective strategy, guys. Evolutionary theory. Leadership may represent an evolutionary adaptation that enhances group survival through improved cooperation, coordination, and collective problem solving across human history, right? And so that's as we evolve, as the shift changes, we're able to adapt, right? And so that's one of the theories that's there. All right, so guys, we have one more. When people imagine a leader, what qualities do they picture? Do these assumptions help or hurt fair leadership opportunities? Are we looking for someone huge and tall and bold, broad shoulders? Do we only see men in this role? Do we see only a certain type of man, a middle-aged man? Like, who's the type of person do we see? So some of those assumptions, do they hurt or do they make leadership fair opportunities for all? If we don't see them as a leader, how will they be hired as one? How will they be accepted as one? Right? How do they actually integrate and infiltrate that system if they're never the vision or picture of what a leader is or could be? Leadership effectiveness. Context is everything. Understanding leadership effectiveness requires moving beyond the question of what makes a good leader to asking what makes a good leader in this specific situation. Research consistently shows there is no single best way to lead. Context, followers, and circumstances all matter tremendously. Okay, they all matter. It really depends on the situation. I like to think I have pretty solid leadership skills, absolutely. But if you put me in the middle of the Amazon and tell me to lead some people, let me tell you, we are done for. Okay, we are absolutely done for. I could never survive on Naked and Afraid. I have zero survival skills outside the city. Now I have a bug out bag in case the zombies come. I am ready. But if you put me in the middle of the Amazon, when the lights go out, I'm done. I work off of street lights, right? I'm a city girl. I like street lights. They make me feel safe. When there's no street lights, that is where all of my leadership would fail. Okay? Just letting you know. So situational theories. Effective leaders adapt to circumstances. Different situations demand different approaches. What works during stability may fall during crisis and vice versa. When everything was fine, I had a lot more opportunities to give demands for things like, guys, make sure this is done, make sure this is done, make sure this is done. Prior to COVID, I also supported 40 different contracted schools. And in supporting those contracted schools, we had a lot of deadlines we had to meet. When you're working with special needs children, everything is on a deadline. IEPs, there's so many compliance components that had to be done. But when COVID happened, we were more supportive. I hired other people to help with the deadlines to make sure that those deadlines were met because when I reached out to the teachers and I'm talking to the teachers, they were dealing with so many other factors, their own health, the worry, the concern, their mental health wasn't right. And I was like, okay, they don't need to be reminded that this kid's IEP is due. They need some attention. So we had to set up some teacher Zooms where I called it teacher happy hour, and we would just have conversations. First, I did it on a small scale with 2 or 3 because I felt Like when it was a smaller circle, a smaller group, then they felt comfortable with sharing. And that's exactly what happened. Then we built that out a little bit more. And then we chunked it down and again, made it small again to keep those conversations intimate. And then there's the Fiedler's model. Some leaders thrive in stable, structured environments, while others excel during change or stress. Matching leadership style to situational demands predicts success. So I have a colleague of mine, and he loves when there's a problem. When there's a problem, he rallies, he steps up, he likes to be the change agent. He likes to be the one to go in there. So when things are rocky, that's when we call him in. We call him in at the end when we have tried all we could and we need a different perspective. And he comes in and he has that sort of command. He's a tall gentleman. He is about 6'3", 300 pounds, played football, coached football. So he brings that whole football dynamic to the conversation, to his leadership style. And it's obvious, right? But people will listen to him and feel more comfortable with him giving the message. Then they do my little 5'3" self. They're like, all right, Miss Gina, sure, no problem. But he can give them that sort of resolution, or we can at least have a balance of both. Then there's the LMX theory. Leaders, members, exchange, emphasis, relationship quality, positive and trusting connection between leaders and followers create higher performance and satisfaction. That goes back to the building of the relationships, guys. That's where it matters most, okay? And I believe that may be it. All right. So those are all of the questions. That is my entire PowerPoint. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me through the portal, or you can email me. Hopefully we're good to go. Again, guys, I'm sorry about having to make it asynchronous, but I do have an appointment for my son that I have to attend to. So that's it. I'll see you guys next week, though. Take care.